Hey friends, how you doing? As you know, I love wrestling. And it's not just the major companies, and I don't promote one company over another on my channel. So on Thursdays, I like to highlight either an action figure and wrestler featured either on Impact or featured on Ring of Honor. And the reason why is because both shows air on Thursday, and I think it's nice to have a little understanding that you may not have known about a particular wrestler featured on that programming. Now, that being said, I want to talk about scary wrestlers. And not just scary wrestlers, but one scary wrestler in particular. Now, when I say scary, I don't mean, spooky, Undertaker, the Boogeyman, all of those type of characters. Those guys don't frighten me because you don't see them in real life. I am talking about violence. And when most people think of just disgustingly violent wrestling, they think of guys like Nick Cage or guys like Moxley. But again, that over the top violence that those guys have in their matches is not something that is relatable to the average person. But what is relatable is a normal looking cat with a chip on his shoulder who enjoys tearing you apart with his bare hands, and that is Roderick Strong. Most people know him from his time in WWE, NXT, and more recently AEW television, only wrestling television. And he is featured on Ring of Honor alongside his new faction, the Undisputed Kingdom, um, which includes Adam Cole and, no, I think Adam Cole is the leader, but he's out with injury. Matt Taven and Mike Bennett. And when I think of him, I think of two of the most just violent acts I've seen in a professional wrestling ring. Now, before we go on, I want to let you guys know that he's going to be featured in tomorrow's special Ring of Honor event, Death Before Dishonor, where he will be facing Mark Briscoe for the Ring of Honor Heavyweight Championship, a championship which he's won before in the original iteration of Ring of Honor. And I think that, yes, Mark Briscoe is a great wrestler and very lovable, but he is really being embraced by the AEW crowd. And I think having a wrestler who is primarily focused on Ring of Honor be their main champion would be a good thing. Plus, I just really like what he does, as violent as it is. Um, let's go into a little history here as far as Ring of Honor goes. As I said, he was a one-time world champion. He was a tag team champion with Austin Aries, television champion twice, and he was the second Triple Crown champion of Ring of Honor. And so, he holds a lot of prestige in that promotion. And, from my personal viewing experience of him, um, my introduction to him was NXT, where he kind of dropped in as a white meat babyface and slowly evolved into a heel. But where I really first saw his violence was the first WWE event over in Saudi Arabia, the Greatest Royal Rumble, and it was one of Daniel Bryan's first returns, if I remember correctly. And when Roderick Strong entered the ring, you saw this like great big shit-eating grin on Daniel Bryan's face. It was like there was a recognition of something, even though these guys hadn't interacted on WWE television before. And the way they looked at each other, you would have thought they were going to team up. And what they proceeded to do was just chop the living shit out of each other. Um, Brian Daniels' chest, I'll see if I can find a picture of it. I'll put it right here. But his chest looked like hamburger. Just after a few minutes of them engaging, and they were both just sadistically smiling and having the time of their lives. And it was like, whoa, this cat is different. And I think some of that comes from, you know, A lot of wrestlers, they are born with a lot of physical gifts. They're tall. They have a big frame that they can add a lot of muscle to. They're handsome. They have great genetics. But there are some guys who absolutely love wrestling who have to work for everything they have, and they don't have the height. They don't have the size. They don't have that great metabolism to stay lean all the time. And so they compensate by adapting a style that suits their size. A lot of these guys become high flyers. A lot of guys like Brian Danielson, he goes the route, or even who's that cat? Zack Sabre Jr., another great example. A guy, he has height, but he's very lanky, has trouble putting on muscle. So what did him and Brian Danielson do? They became expert technicians in the vein of a guy like Bob Backlund, who did. These guys, they don't have the mass of your Hulk Hogan's, but they have the legitimate wrestling ability, and that applies to Roderick Strong as well. But what some other guys do that aren't blessed with these, physical attributes, guys like Mankind, Nick Gage, they lean into the weapons and the hardcore and the violence. And with Roderick Strong, he has a combination of just legitimate wrestling acumen with the, you know, he seems to almost take a sadistic pleasure in hurting you with his bare hands via chops, via backbreakers. He's called Messiah the Backbreaker because he can hit a backbreaker of any variation at any time out of nowhere. Um, and he takes joy in presenting wrestling as something that is legitimate, which you don't see a lot nowadays. And I'm not putting wrestling down, that your Bob Backlund, you had the guys in the AWA, um, even a little bit in the WCCW, to where they wanted to present it as a sport. And so they took pride in making every piece of action look legitimate. Probably one of the most brutal examples was a match for Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. I believe it was Roderick Strong and Daniel Bryan versus the Young Bucks. And you hear the story that the Young Bucks tell about it is probably one of the most painful experiences they had. And the way they tell the story, it's kind of like funny and like, oh, these guys are exaggerating. But you see the match, and the whole setup is they were trying to get the Young Bucks. They were trying to get the crowd to embrace the Young Bucks and to sympathize with the Young Bucks. And for obvious reasons, they're not the most sympathetic good guys. And so the Daniel Bryan or Brian Danielson and Roderick Strong, their headspace was, well, if we just brutalize the ever living shit out of these guys and they make a comeback, the crowd has no choice but to embrace them. And so they went at the Young Bucks. And when the crowd cheered it, they went at them harder. And when the crowd didn't get behind the Young Bucks, they turned up the violence. And I would say about the 5 minute mark, you're like, okay, this is a good match. At about the 7 to 10 minute mark, you're like, you're uncomfortable with what's going on in the ring. You don't feel like you're watching a you don't feel like you're watching an entertainment experience. You feel like you're watching guys fight for their lives. And I think that discomfort and that suspension of disbelief is missing with a lot of wrestlers. But when Roderick Strong is left to his own devices, he makes it clear that I want to be seen as an athlete. And I appreciate that. And it even affects the way that his wife, Marina Shafir, wrestles. She is an underrated, wrestler who is on the come up, I believe, right now, who also features in Ring of Honor. and is on the AEW books. And you see her do a lot of things, a lot of kicks and strikes from mixed martial arts, and she more than not finishes their opponents with a submission move, but it's less something that you will see in a wrestling ring and more of something you would see in a UFC octagon or, quite frankly, a back alley street fight. Her style is not pretty at all, and so I'm hoping that as much as Mark Briscoe is beloved and as hard as he can be to watch, I want to see him get the championship and just kick the shit out of people for as long as he can. That is what I want to see. And so I am tuning into Ring of Honor tonight on Honor Club. It's only $10. $10 for Ring of Honor Club app. The best $10 I've spent in a while. And you get Death Before Dishonor with a lot of great matches. You have Athena, who's going to be taking on Red Velvet for the Women's Champion. Billy Starks versus Queen Aminata for the Women's Television Championship. You have Roderick Strong and Mark Briscoe, as I said before, in a lot of great matches. So I will see you guys next time. Until then, keep watching that wrestling and be kind to each other. I'm out.